This is an important occasion for us. We have been working for months on a tutorial about open data. This has been a joint effort of the Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency, GIFT, and the Ministry of Finance in Mexico, a GIFT lead steward. So first, thank you for joining. Thank you for your curiosity and your engagement in knowing more about open data, about its use in advancing fiscal transparency and citizen engagement. These are the topics that we are going to be talking about today, and these are the topics that are addressed in the tutorial. But also, before we start, let me emphasize our gratitude to the Ministry of Finance in Mexico, and particularly to the Unit for Evaluation and Fiscal Transparency at the Budget Department of the Ministry. They have been devoting resources, time, talent, experience, and even risking themselves a little bit into the wonderful endeavor of disclosing useful, meaningful budget information for users. So this tutorial is opening and promoting the use of open data. The goal is to spread and to provide incentives for users to have access to this information for their benefit, for their independent analysis, and for a better understanding on how public resources are used. With that, let me ask my colleagues, Aura Martinez, Director of Evaluation and Fiscal Transparency at the Ministry of Finance in Mexico, and Tariq Gracida, my colleague at GIFT. He is responsible of IT and communications to lead us in this webinar. And thank you again for joining.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Aura Martinez from the Ministry of Finance in Mexico, and thank you, Juan Pablo, and especially the whole GIFT team for joining us in this webinar, and of course, for making this tutorial possible, and also to all of those joining around the world. I know the engagement that this tutorial has arisen, and also the review documents, the videos. We are very happy to see that there are a lot of champions out there trying to open fiscal budget data, fiscal and budget data. So we are very happy to join this webinar. And thank you also, Juan Pablo, for the opportunity for the ministry to share our experiences. Today, we want to emphasize the use of open data and the promotion of open data since its opening process. We would like to use a case study, so I'm gonna start my presentation. As we know, data is only valuable as long as it's used. That's something that we emphasize, through all the documents and the videos in the tutorial, but I wanna start with that because, as we all know, and as GIFT community and GIFT's network has also been arising through the meetings, through the community and the social networks, this is one of our biggest challenges as publishers. To guarantee the usability of our data, we must think about it since the opening process. What does this mean? That means that starting at the very beginning, we need to emphasize how are we going to use our data. For that, we need to have user-oriented opening process. And I'm going to guide you through the opening process that we've seen through the tutorial using a case study. That is the subnational federal transfers in Mexico. Many of you come from countries that have federal governments or central governments. It depends. Sometimes they're called municipalities, states, delegations. That in Mexico, there are called states and municipalities. So starting with the opening process, listening to the demand. Why is this key? Knowing what data will be useful to a certain audience is crucial to the success of its publication. The most obvious way would be to attend straightforward requests, or many other ways to express it. What does this mean? Sometimes we as publishers want to go to the full extent of the opening data. So we go for JSONs or formats that are very high on tech capability. That might not be the best for everyone. Sometimes we open data in Excel format or a spreadsheet, a CSV format. That could be also useful for some people. Sometimes we go through visualization, and that is also useful for other kind of audience. But enable the options that allow your data to achieve their highest potential is what's also key for meeting target audience. Think about users. What will they use best? In our case study, which is of national transfer, we will take you back to 2011, when we were in a hackathon on OpenData.mx, Mexico, and we asked a straightforward request, as we were talking before. And the straightforward request was not, oh, I want to have some subnational data transfers from data transfers information. The key question was, identify if local governments provide resources for sustainable urban mobility. What do they invest in this case? Are they talking about more engagement in car or carbon intensive mobility options? Or were they talking about maybe bicycles or pedestrian friendly options? That was the question. People at this hackathon were not lost. Most of social organizations tend to already have made a lot of research. So here they have already identified some reports that could be useful, but they look like this. They were in a PDF format. They had a lot of subtotals, as you can see. They have headers that could be confusing. And as we can see, there were like more than 9,600 pages. A lot of work had heterogeneous reports. That means different audience, different data aggregation, and even definitions. So these may, and also not unique identifiers for projects. This means if I want to look for a specific project in a specific state or municipality and follow it through time, it would be impossible to me. So even where the information was there was not the easiest to use. Nonetheless, it's important to know that even the publication of information in its least level of opening, which is the PDF, it's useful. This organization came out with a report on how a diagnose on how federal funds were used for transport and urban mobility. So this data was still useful, but as we've seen in our steps for opening process, identifying source and format is key. Right now, in our case study, the format was not useful in its full extent. The information was there, but it was not as usable. So, as we know, there is not a single way or format to publish. There is a lot of tools to consider, and there's a lot of audiences that could be approached or get further away, depending on what is our format. As we've seen, there's JSON, there's an Excel format, there's a CSV format, a lot, even APIs or visualizations directly. So what would make my audience closer to my data, closer to their usage? It depends on the type of user. So maybe they have same interests, but they have different capabilities. For example, an app open data expert would be a user that's able to use an API. That is a specific way of querying information online, or even data mining tools, either open or closed source. Also, there would be a recurring user. This would be a user that would constantly want to look at our data, that is interested. So they probably are more used to some formats as CSV, which is open, or as JSON, that is also open and used through browsers in the internet. And then we'll have our casual user, someone that is maybe just curious about the information that has or that stumps into it by chance or by your social media resources. And what would they use? They mostly would use closed format, closed source or private or proprietary software as Excel, which is very common in government and also non-profit organizations as well, or go directly to visualizations, which can be very easily engageable through our cell phones or daily lives. So the route to follow and the actions to perform in our opening data process will definitely depend on the original conditions of the information. As publishers, we know some of the information is not in the same place, in the same format, and it's not even public yet. In this case, in our case study, luckily it was public. It was also coming from a computer system where the reporting of public spending existed. However, as we saw for the PDF I showed you before, I'll come back to this, it was heterogeneous information. There was a lack of clarity in definitions or of what was being reported. There were project IDs that were quarterly changing. So as I said, there was no a chance that people could follow up per a project through its entire life process. There was a lack of instruments for data quality governance. And also, it was only possible to make extraction of the information in a closed format. So all of these were challenges. So we made a diagnosis. This is an original source issue. There is not an issue with the publicity of the information, but it's an issue on their openness. The data was not open and it was coming from the source. So we needed to start working in the system. The system needed to be redefined. The system was called unique format system. So it needed to be reformed and redesigned, thinking straightforward in opening information and its usage. We come to our next steps that we've seen through the tutorial: debugging and cleaning and verify national and international standards. What were improvement goals while doing this, while engaging in these steps of the process? First of all, avoiding confusing information. If we want the public to use of information and use it correctly, and so it will be useful for their goals and for taking decision making, either inside and outside the government, we need to avoid confusion from the beginning. This involved also avoiding duplicated or not existing information and guaranteeing data standardization. Our advantages: we have already orderly and quality. We could have orderly and quality information to publish. We will have with this redesign immediate availability for analysis and decision making, and also it has internal advantages. This redesign we foresee will have reductions of publishing process time. So going back to our case study. These steps, how did we engage them? We implemented modifications to the reporting computer system through narrowing the criteria and making adjustments to existing norms. This is a lot of what we've been asked in several GIF meetings. Norms have also sometimes to be modified in order to become useful for the opening process, in order to narrow criteria for capturing or for reporting information, so it can be used in the next step, so in standardization. We need to use both the spending disaggregation level and government accounting standards coming from the general law of government accounting, but also implement a system of measure units, geolocation, and use the national standards for geolocation. Many subnational governments didn't use general statistics or geographical standards, which make very hard to compare the information or to place it in a map. That thinking on visualization, thinking forward on how people would use information was key. So for the cleaning stage of these steps, we needed to make definitions. What does a project mean? Maybe there is a project type either being social, economic, government infrastructure, acquisition programs, maintenance programs. All of these are different. And then we needed to purge. That means eliminating information that was inactive or lacking of the characteristics of a project. We need to come to a definition. The previous step of coming to a definition helps you have better quality of the data and then purge it. Why? Sometimes some reporting mechanisms allow you to place, let's say, an activity such as cleaning as a project. So you don't know, you can't compare a cleaning activity with an infrastructure project engagement. But if you don't have a previous definition, these concepts will be mixed and your data will be not as useful. And then as to be able to follow up on this definition and how have this been implemented and how these projects that are now correctly defined were implemented in the communities, we needed to make sure there was an ID for each project through the whole process of its cycle. With this came the standardization. We needed to guarantee we were going to use the same language. For this, as we know when we use budget data, it's not the same to talk about approved budget or modified budget. Committed budget is very different, and then paid budget is a whole different story. So if we don't know and we don't use the same terms on talking about this budget data, it's very difficult for then the information to be used or for it to have the quality. Number two on this standardization. Also, we need to talk about the same national catalogs in terms of geolocated information. And number three, we needed to have budget catalogs. As this might be very common to your own countries, these are key to have to start in the same base, to speak the same language. This will come to become an anatomy of a database. The ID for the historical follow-up, then the national standard, and then the internal standardization. This previous definition becomes a database. And next, as we know for our tutorial and videos, we need to think about sustainability. All the process I just talked about in subnational federal transfers might be very difficult to maintain if it's doing manually. If someone has to do it every quarter, transform whatever information is being inputted in the system and manually change it, that would not be possible. It is a continuous cycle. So in order to improve the use, exploitation, and impact of the data, we need to know and very responsibly and honestly assess our publication capabilities. What's the quality in the information? How do the users will need to see it? And also if there are internal consumption needs. In order to achieve sustainability in our case studies, we needed to update their norms, as I already said, but always it's key. It's not enough to update norms. It's also key to train people in charge of the information to adjust their process and adjust their day-to-day activities to this new paradigm of opening information by default. So in Mexico, we have 32 states and over 2,400 municipalities where we train over 12,000 civil servants. That was an effort that only made possible that the updating of the norms and the cleaning and debugging of the information we had and the standardization was render results in meanings of open data and also having information for key decision making. Also, even if we train all the civil servants, we need to have some quality check on the information when it's reported by someone else, as in this case that it's reported by subnational governments to the federal government. For that, we created a quality of information system index. This has measurements per each component that is inputted in the system, and then there we are only, as we know, what is not measured cannot be improved. So now we know we have improvement. As we see in our graph, there has been a national mean value advancement through the years since 2014 to date. Now we come to the um, most important part of this webinar, that being how to spread and promote the use of data. As we see, we have been through each of the steps of the opening process, talking about, well, all these steps. How do we make them important for the people to use the information? It's key to know. It is very hard to promote the use of uninteresting data. And most of the times we get asked, are visualization the best way to get citizens involved? That is not necessarily the case. So we want to make examples of how to encourage the use of data. So a map is not exactly just how we want to show information from start. We need to have a strategy on how people are going to use the data. And first of all, we have to make the data known. Unfamiliar data or lack of capabilities of use of data are our enemies. We need to use social network, partake of events, make face-to-face workshop, address online courses. The tools are pretty much unlimited. We also can use a lot of two-way mechanisms to communicate with our audiences. One key mechanism is social networks. And how do they work as a two-way mechanism? Well, that goes through the engagement, either through messages, direct messages, and our ability to engage with the audience through also comments, likes. That's the way we know which are the most interesting topics and which topics are not clear. So people tend to have confusions or even complaints about the information that we are publishing. And another way to use social networks as a little more of an indirect way is using analytics that come with Facebook insights. So we know which information generates more engagement, which kind of communication it's more useful to meet with our audiences. Also, we can engage with more experienced or more tech capable audiences through data expedition. That means to open our data in a form of a JSON or an API, a more advanced data mining tool enabler. So people with these capabilities use the information. And also, as another option, but not as the only one, we can use visualizations for context. As we were saying, people don't, it's very hard to make people use uninteresting data for them. But information about their surroundings is very interesting for people. People want to know what information is being, what budget is being used in their communities, how is it being spent, in which specific projects, and importantly as well, how would this affect them? So information available to users with different capabilities is will address diverse interests. As we saw in our case study, when we have georeferenced open data, we can also use this as context through the visualization. In this case study as well, we know that the information about states and municipalities is one of the most interesting ones for the people. How do we know this? Through our analytics from Google Analytics in our website, and also this way you can use your own websites to locate which information has the potential to get citizens involved, which one is closer to users. Knowing this and having made all this process of opening our information on a state on subnational transfer from federal governments, transforming it to another standard way of publishing, standard IDing, cleaning, debugging, and also analyzing our engagement and listening to the demand from 2011 till now, we were able to create the Open Data Day, the Open Data Day rally. In this rally, we use our geolocated data through a map and through the specific cards per project, and ask the people to go through different phases. That is to analyze the information, to choose projects that we will review, and the strategies to communicate how projects will be engaged, we ask the people to go and find the projects in their communities and to use social networks through hashtags and also through tagging our social media accounts. And then a jury evaluates the points obtained during the rally, sums them up, and judge their communication strategies and their use of data. What have been the results of this rally? The information got out there. People started taking pictures, making visualizations, interviewing both beneficiaries and people responsible for the projects. Pretty much whatever way of communicating the information they were seeing in both in the visualization and in the database, you name it, they used it. And we had a lot of citizen participation that since its first edition, the reports have improved. What does this tell us? People not only want to use the information in a certain particular way, but they want to make it more impactful from themselves. So we started with very basic citizen in situ revision or engagement with the public infrastructure, just seeing it was there or how it was advancing. And now we have visualizations made by the main users. We have even different cards that they made and different map oriented visualizations, a lot of interviews, a lot of communication strategies, people that actually engage their whole community, and a lot of different range of people that have engaged in the rally. This is also a question that we've been asked a lot, engaging different audiences through this and to making all the capabilities and the potential of the data, of the budget data available to people. We've engaged with students from communities that are not the capital city, which is sometimes difficult. Engage people that are not in the main urban areas. We also have engaged parents that want to locate the surrounding areas. Not only, but also very specialized communities, as people engage only with data, with the highest level of opening data, like APIs. So this type of exercises and this type of the diverse ways of opening information, of putting available opening information, have had a lot of impact in who engages with the information. And in 2008, we were very happy that the Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency GIFT co-sponsored the first edition of the International Rally. In this edition, Colombia and Chile also participated, encouraging citizens to make to do this exercise, get fit, and how do they also find public great value on this? We get feedback on the way we are using information. Sorry, something happened with the presentation. Let me put it back up. There you go. So we get feedback on the information that is generated. We improve the tools that we have, and then establish a productive dialogue between the government and the users of the information, the citizens, to improve how to influence the data that we're publishing. I guess our main goal with this case study is to tell you that it has been a process. It started in 2007 with a lot of norms, but in 2011, the first time we listened to the demand, we were able to know how and what needed to be reconfigured, and we engaged in that exercise. Then through training to figure out the ways to make it sustainable in the time. And then we were able to create the visualization tools to open the information and to engage in an exercise such as the rally. Through the editions of the rally, we have advanced the way we communicate with our audiences and make the information useful for them, until now it's a time that we had the international rally, and we are then again changing our system to, and just this week the subnational transfer system was updated again to engage in a better quality of information, more information, and that will be something that we will be sharing with you in the future, how now we've learned also through the gift community, and how to and what the results of these new reconfigurations will be. So in conclusion, as we see, promoting the use of data is not an isolated task. It's not about just visualizations or just about an event or just about participating or partaking in a dialogue with civil society. We must think about this as an ongoing process that starts from the publication process. Whether the publication tools might vary, that will depend on our data and our goals. And it's also an iterative process. As we've seen from our case study, we started in 2011, we improved, and now 2018, we are ready to improve again. The publisher must think about himself or herself as a facilitator. This means we will be only putting information up there for other publishers to use it, to engage with it, to better the quality. And as we would like to say, this process should also be full of creativity and innovation. As we said in the very beginning, you name it. Which are the tools to make the people engage with budget data? It's up to you. So thank you very much, Gift, for the opportunity to share our experiences with us. Thank you to all that have engaged in the tutorials. Please let all the publishers of budget data about these tutorials. And it's a very interesting process. It's a key process, but it's also a fun process for all. So thank you very much. And I right now think we're going to questions, in case there are any.
I have a question.
Okay, all right. This is Charlie from Afro Leadership in Cameroon in Central Africa.
Hello, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And my only question has to do with the role or maybe priority roles that we should have in this kind of process. In some of our countries in Africa, what I've noticed is that some of these issues of open budgeting and transparency are led by civil society organizations or by activists, funded by international organizations like GIFT or IDP or Open Knowledge. And when I compare with what you did in Mexico, is that you are actually the government leading the process. So given this and given the success that we see you have, do you think we can reach the same level of success in civil society-led initiatives?
As we said, this was an iterative process that we worked alongside civil society. Though it's very important to have government engagement, and in that I think GIFT has been very successful in getting to the government champions and the government actors that could engage with civil society in order to go through this whole process from listening to the demand to the improvement and better engagement with the information. So while the civil society is key, and as I see this as a publisher from government, we are just facilitators of the use civil society can make of the information. So in that terms, I think it's a collaborative process, but the whole potential of the information will only be achieved if civil society is engaged in its usage.
Hi, I have a question too. My name's Fiona and I'm from the One campaign. So I'm just curious, first of all, thank you for the presentation, and it does sound like it's been an incredibly successful initiative and be amazing if this could be replicated elsewhere. But I'm interested to know whether you had pushback from any actors, either within government or externally, for any, or whether there were any kind of bad press stories in holding the government, when the CSOs were holding government to account for these various projects, and how that was dealt with, or what kind of the key challenges were along the way in that regard?
I think one of the key challenges and how the tutorials were also where were they coming from in this effort with GIFT? It's thinking about real life cases from our experience publishing data. So in that sense, that's why we included the step of thinking about sustainability, identifying source and format type of steps, not only as an, let's say, theoretical step, but a very real one. So a key challenge that we faced first forward from 2011 till now was the quality of the information, the source of the information. As you know, there are there are heterogeneous tech capabilities and tech infrastructure within government. So most of the systems, the computer systems, were endeavored as an operational tool, not so much as an opening tool, an opening information tool. So that was one of our first steps. Systems were not ready for opening by default data. And that implies modifying a system, and that implies limited resources. That means IT resources that governments have for both their operation and also the open government initiatives, let's say, as a whole. So as we all know, limited resources in specific in this sense, limited IT resources were first challenge, and I think it's important for countries that are going to replicate or want to engage in their own innovative process in this sense to identify if they share these challenges, and very much along with what Charlie was saying, many times international aid in this process is key. As another challenge that we face, and we came to it we come now to it from the other side of the road, but in the moment was very, very hard. It was the training side. So we needed to train over 12,000 civil servants. Coming from the other side of it, it sounds like a success, but in the very beginning was a big challenge. Many people also, we know that this is a characteristic other countries share. Mexico is very diverse, very heterogeneous. The North does not have the same, the governments from the North do not have the same tech capabilities, even computer system, even, I don't know, internet or computer capabilities in their, either in their tech infrastructure or the people that are operating them than the people from the South. So this heterogeneous starting point for people that were going to report this information was also a challenge which we faced with training, with intensive looking for the quality of the information, which has been taking years. And as we saw in the graph from quality of information improvement, we have improved, but it has been a long process that has also been iterative. Now we are changing again the system to further improve this. So it's a bit of coming from the other side. It looks more like a happy ending, a success, but it's only because we thought about this from the beginning. So it's also key to have that into account. Training is key, and it's much easy to find pushback if you just ask for the information without giving the tools for use. And it's also that in that sense that we sometimes find pushback from users of the information if they think the information is not clear and if they are not given tools for their use. So I think those are the main challenges and how we face them. And I think those are common challenges that opening budget data and also collecting budget data from other levels of government imply.
Thank you. That was really interesting.
There is a question from Suki that you might want to address, although you have touched upon it briefly, related to the sustainability element. How much of the ongoing work relates to engaging data users? You've addressed this, Aura, but if you could
Mhm.
elaborate a little bit on the challenges, and I'm thinking about the case of Mexico, the challenges of maintaining, continuing a dialogue with users, even when the political situation or when the relationship between government in general and civil society is a little bit strained. How, in the case of Mexico, how did you overcome these challenges?
I see the question also, Suki, in the chat. Um, well, as we saw, and this is why it's very important to not think just on visualizations or as opening the highest level of data as the only key to engagement or the sole silver bullet. We also engage with civil society in the way of face-to-face contact, partaking in their events, and also that means sometimes um, being the least favorite invitee to an event, but also being there, being face to face with the users of the information, being able to very, I don't know, out forwardly answer questions of what data is out there, what data is not out there yet, or and maybe what are the reasons for the data that is not out there, it's not out there yet. One key thing when we thought about the tutorial was also in sustainability terms, information that is not organized and that is not standardized and that is not is not useful. So when someone asks, let's say in civil society, why this information is not out there yet? Maybe it does exist, but maybe it's useless. So we need to be very. I think it's a key process of maintaining a constant and open dialogue with civil society about their demands and the capabilities of answering to those demands, but also the capabilities of answering to those demands with different information, with different and diverse sources of information. And that has also gone through making the budget information interesting for different agendas. So, and a little bit more on the how much of the ongoing work it relates to engaging with data users. It's part of the daily work. It's as a fiscal transparency initiative and as the leaders of the fiscal transparency portal, we engage with our analytics a lot in terms of the website and the social networks. We have made also a couple of surveys on both on format and usage. Also, we partake in these events. And also, as we said in this little webinar, is engaging the data users. It's a process that even if it's not always as face to face as we want, being thinking on it through the opening process is let's say a chip in your core processor that you need to have through the opening process. So I would say that a lot of the work that we do is engaging data users in one way or another, and also being able to have clear upfront explanations in an open dialogue with civil society, even in times of turmoil that could be faced by the publishers when it comes to government. And I would like to take Juan Pablo's cue to present this slide that I haven't showed before. That is like a key tool that we also have used to our publication and to our engagement, and we aim to address it a bit further, is the GIFT's principles on public participation in fiscal policy. So thinking on how we can make our data and the participation and engagement on events or public participation efforts more accessible, open, inclusive, timely, and and I think if you go to the website, our GIF's website, you can find all these principles in depth. These also are tools, and going to Suki's and to Charlie's question, that help us guide our engagement. So we have also, let's say, our challenges in order upfront, and our challenges involve being closely and every time more in line with the principles of public participation that's been put forward by GIFT.
Well, thank you very much, Aura, again for your time, for your engagement in this topic. You, along with your team, Lorena, Angel at the Ministry of Finance in Mexico, have been key stakeholders in the process that now benefits a whole country, Mexico, our network, and that has a positive influence in many countries of the world. So let me take this opportunity to openly acknowledge your contribution, the contribution of your team and of the Ministry of Finance in Mexico to fiscal transparency in the region, in our country. I'm Mexican, but also in throughout the world. Thank you so much for that. Let me also thank Tariq, who has been supporting from all technical and strategic perspectives this effort. He has been backstaging today to make this webinar possible. And let me remind our audience that the tutorial is out there for you to see. Every video has a document that is supporting the contents, so you can go into details. We're talking about 10 videos plus this webinar that presents the series. So it's a very good and comprehensive opportunity for you to get introduced and go into detail in the world of the use of tools for a better disclosure of budget information. And finally, let me thank you who are listening today, who got off work for a little bit to be able to be part of this effort, and for taking the time to provide your questions and comments. I will leave it there, but I will ask you, Aura, to close our webinar from Mexico. Thank you again.
Thank you, Juan Pablo, and thank you everyone that's out there listening. As Juan Pablo said, check out the videos, check out the documents, and if you have any questions, please feel free to engage us either through our social media that it's on the slide, or through GIFT Network. We are very happy to listen also to your success stories when you have them. And well, let's take open budget data to the street.
Gracias. Thank you so much.